Hi everyone, welcome back to the second video on the series AI in Practice. In this video, we're building on the previous video about the tools. Now we're talking about techniques that help us to prompt a little bit better. Just to recap, series-wise, last video was about 3 different AI tools about research, knowledge management, and writing. This video, we're going to be shifting from the tools to how we can use the tools better, how we can prompt better. There were originally meant to be 3 parts to this video, but I think to keep the video manageable, I've opted to cover the first 2. The last video, prompts to process, actually about custom GPTs. I'll cover that in a subsequent video. Okay, so let's just dive right in about common prompting problems. I think some of our friends, some of our colleagues have used AI before, but for whatever reason, they have gotten AI outputs that feel overly generic and they just want to walk away. So I've just illustrated 3 fictional codes that we may have heard or may ourselves experience. Okay, so first fictional code about a common pain point. The responses from AI just feel so bland and unusable. While it apparently looks very refined, it looks like something that your intern could have actually produced themselves, but it's not pitched at the level that you yourself as like a high level strategist or an experienced officer would be able to produce. So it feels very superficial. Second types of pain point is that the output just doesn't get your context. They use the terms and the approaches that just doesn't match what you or your team are currently doing. And then if it doesn't match your context, it just feels inappropriate. You can't really use it. Then the third category would be about the sheer uncertainty of how to prompt it better. We know about friends or colleagues who are just like magical wizards with AI. They can just prompt and then some magical output comes at just exactly what they need. But when we try to prompt, it just feels difficult. So what usually happens? Some will choose to give up, or they'll settle for whatever mediocre output and they just copy paste it and then just like you leave it as is, make some minor edits, or ultimately they just do it themselves. They rather not use AI altogether. So for example, I know of folks who try to use AI to analyze data. So for example, when they conduct a survey or focus group discussion, they parse the output through AI, but then what comes back just doesn't seem to match. Don't use the correct terminology, don't use the correct concepts. And it gets to the point where they're so frustrated, they just do it themselves. Very understandable problem, but I think it's a mistaken result, because the issue isn't about AI, it's about how we frame the prompts. Then that leads to the problems that we're encountering here. So that's the value proposition for this particular video. We want to acquire some techniques that help us prompt better. Okay. So let's just do a quick demonstration about one-shot prompting. What is one-shot prompting? One-shot prompting is like, your typical Google search engine, right? I just put in a certain search query, I expect something to come back, versus like say an ongoing conversation. So let's use an example about prompting using a travel example. Okay, I've opted to use the temporary chat function in ChatGPT because ChatGPT's memory is such that it's trained on your existing data, or it remembers your existing data. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I just want to show you in a decontextualized sort of way what it will produce. Otherwise, it will actually bear in all of the prior instructions that I've given to ChatGPT. Your results might differ from mine. Okay, so let's just use a travel example where I get AI to plan a 7-day travel itinerary to Japan, and let's just see what it comes up with. Okay, 7-day travel itinerary to Japan, balanced culture, modern experiences, food and nature. It assumes I'll land in Tokyo, depart for Osaka, blah, 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 blah. Okay, day 1, arrive in Tokyo, so on and so forth. Very frankly, I've never been to Japan before, so I can't really advise whether this is a good or bad kind of travel itinerary. Now, this may look usable. You can probably make some edits, but this can be a lot better if you provide in some context. So what kind of context you need to provide? What would help you to produce a prompt that is better? To prompt better, what you can do is to use existing frameworks. You may have heard of this framework called the COSTAR framework. It's basically an acronym that stands for context, objective, style, task, audience, and role. And then when you input these set of things, you answer these kind of questions. What's the background? What kind of tone do you want? Who is it for? What kind of role should AI act as? The output that AI comes up with will be far, far, far better than what you had previously produced. So just to show you real time, I'm just going to copy paste this prompt, right? Which you can see just by on the color matching, right? This prompt is an example of how you would have prompted using the CoStar framework. And then it's going to contrast this with what you had earlier seen in terms of the one-shot prompt, the generic line, plan a 7-day itinerary. So I've included a prompt. And the context is that I want to travel with a toddler and an elderly parent. I want to have a mix of rest, sightseeing, and kid-friendly activities. That's the context included in the COSTAR framework. And you can immediately see a very big difference in the kind of output that it produces, right? Because, for example, I recommend staying somewhere central like these places because of easy access to transit and attractions, and you know in your mind that this is tied to the context you have provided about having a toddler or elderly parents. There are even tips provided. Don't plan anything too ambitious. Give yourself space to adjust, get oriented. See things like zoo. There are even comments that it's great for toddlers, casual, relax in the park. You can start to see that the output that it produces, in contrast to the previous output, is far more targeted. Okay, so what do we learn from this? We learned that using some kind of baseline framework, like the COSTAR framework, is very helpful in producing output that is more improved than the very generic one-shot prompt. But why is this the case, right? What are the underlying principles of prompting that we want to learn from this? Underlying prompting principles, okay, are that AI. Okay, so what do you need to know about AI? AI is a context-sensitive generator that doesn't understand the same way that humans do. If you know a little bit about AI and how it produces outputs, it's producing outputs probabilistically, meaning what it will do is that it will calculate the probability of a particular word appearing based on the conditional probability of all of the previous words. So it's just doing this random assessment trained on the World Wide Web's data, all the data, and then you're just calculating, okay, if the word context comes out, what is the likelihood that the next word that comes out is sensitive? And then it does it so on and so forth. The genius and the magic is that it actually produces something that's quite workable for us now. But it also means that any small changes in the input that you provide in your initial prompt is going to have very different kinds of outputs. And therefore, point two, prompting is not just about clever phrasing of your output, it's actually about scaffolding with clear intent, putting your structured tasks, roles, and tones. And so then you start to see a shift. No longer are you prompting AI like a search engine. Rather, you're engineering the context in which AI works, and then therefore the output produced will be very, very powerful. Okay, so that's the upshot when it comes to prompting using the COSTAR framework. The COSTAR framework, I would consider this a novice level prompting technique because it's sufficiently powerful for most tasks. And it works especially well when you kind of already know what you want, you just want the AI to execute. But here is the problem. What happens if you don't have enough information or you don't even know what your aim is? See, this COSTAR framework, right, is actually quite taxing on you as a user because it requires you to put a lot of upfront information, and not all of these things you would have already known to be important or relevant. Okay? So the COSTAR framework kind of already works when you have your baseline knowledge there. So this is a limitation of the COSTAR framework, and I want to explain an approach to improving your prompts using this 2x2 matrix. Okay, so this 2x2 matrix, right, is my attempt to help us to understand how we can sort of categorize what we know, what we don't know, and how we can prompt better based on these categories. So let's orientate yourselves. Y-axis are about your aims, how much you know about your aims. X-axis, horizontal, are about the information you have. Okay, so based on each of these quadrants, you have a certain kind of response. So obviously, known aims, known information. I'm flying to Tokyo 7 days, and I want to plan my itinerary. This is traditionally where your COSTAR framework will come in very helpful because you have all of these aims and information that's known. Next quadrant, simply, I book leave in December. I don't know where to go. What suits my family? Unknown information that you're asking AI. Traditionally, this would be something that you just go on Google, right? Things that are family friendly. Then whatever Google comes back, that's what you have done. Third quadrant, now we're getting somewhere interesting. Unknown aims, known information. I want to take a break at the year end, but I haven't decided where or what kind of trip. Now, why is this considered unknown aims? Because you haven't even scoped out what kind of trip or even where you want to go. But why is it known information? The idea here is that you have certain kind of preferences, certain kind of behavior, certain kind of history that you have residing in your head that you have not otherwise revealed or you may not have otherwise recognized as relevant to the query. Okay, so the known information is residing somewhere in your head, you just need to pull it out. Last category, unknown aims, unknown information. This one lagi words, use 什么都不懂. Okay, I feel tired and restless. I don't even know whether travel is the answer. This is the most confusing category. But you can start to see, right, that the first row requires a certain kind of prompting technique vs the second row. So let's think about layering this on with the actual prompts that we could use. Again, first row, first column, known aims, known information, this is where your COSTAR framework will come in very handy. I've put in a very summarized version there, but essentially, if you have all this information, you can just plug it in, improve pacing and local experience. Let's go to the next quadrant. Also very simple. I know my aims, 10 days in December on a relaxing trip, unknown information, suggest 3 baby-friendly destinations with budgets. Again, this is something that you could have otherwise done with Google. Very simple. More interesting ones are the next column. No, sorry, next row. Unknown aims, known information. I want a break, don't know what kind. Could you ask me some questions to figure out what I need? Then last quadrant, unknown aims, unknown information. I feel drained, need a reset. Could we explore what might help, even if it's not travel? Let's do some generalization here. If you look at the prompts in the first row, the things that are in bold, we are making queries and giving instructions to the AI. Whereas in the second row, we are not so much giving instructions, but we're guiding the AI to ask us questions, to prompt us using better questions, to elicit or to develop thoughts in our head that could be relevant. And accordingly, the way we prompt is going to be very different, and the way we treat the AI is also going to be very different. No longer like a glorified search engine like Google or Yahoo, if you even know what that is, but now it's like a thought partner. Okay, let's generalize even further, separating this from the travel example, right? So in cases, general cases where you have known aims and known information, again, just use the COSTAR framework. In cases where you have known aims and unknown information, this is one of my favorite prompts. Rather than I do the work in creating the prompt, why not I prompt AI to generate an effective prompt? So previous video, we saw deep research. I haven't demonstrated image generation, but you probably would have heard about the Studio Ghibli controversy. Okay, if like say I were to generate a series of images for a marketing campaign, but the problem is I don't know anything about design principles or design styles or genres of that sort. How on earth am I going to be able to prompt the AI to create an image that meets my requirements or meets my client's requirements? Instead, what I should do is I should ask the AI to ask me what are my preferences, ask me for details about my client, then generate the image prompt that I throw back into ChatGPT or I throw back into Gemini to then develop the image or the deep research itself. Same thing for deep research. In cases where you're going to throw something into a AI to generate a 20-minute and a 30-page report, you better make sure that it's something aligned to your interest to begin with. Otherwise, you're going to waste your time. So this is one of my favorite prompts to use. Next, unknown aims, known information. Ask me reflective questions to uncover what I actually need or want to or what to work on. Okay, I use this in some cases where I want to journal. There are a lot of bundled thoughts in my head. I need some support. Okay, that's where AI helps me to just uncover this. And you can start to see that this sounds like a very therapy-based question. This could be a separate video on its own, but I think these kind of use cases will be increasingly common. Last category, here's my rough idea what are blind spots, assumptions, or unexplored angles I haven't considered. Now, this is a very, very powerful prompt. What I would typically do is after I've created a certain proposal or certain idea that I want to pitch, I would throw this entire idea into ChatGPT or Gemini. I'll ask it, now, based on this idea, what are things I haven't considered? And this is the most powerful category, right? Where AI is now helping you to clarify your aims or clarify information or clarify things that you will never have yourself thought of. And it will level up the quality of your work by miles. Okay, it's incalculable what it can do. Okay, because you will never have yourself been able to come up with this. Okay, and my favorite prompt, bar none, is this final prompt here. Okay, before proceeding, ask me questions to clarify my intent or info I might be missing. I like this so much that I even created a keyboard shortcut that I just press BPA and then this entire sentence comes out. And I use this in literally almost every single one of my ChatGPT threads. Anytime I want to do something, thinking of soundboarding an idea, thinking of assessing a proposal, this is kind of what I do. Okay, as a default. So stepping back, I hope that what we are starting to see is that prompting effectively is not just about your query or your terms, but well, frankly speaking, you can start to use AI to sharpen your thinking, okay, to help you to anticipate things that you will not have otherwise anticipated. So then that brings us very nicely into the second technique, prompts that help us to think better. Okay, so here, what do we see? This section is about countering cognitive biases. It's based very closely on this work by Daniel Kahneman, one of my heroes. Lah. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. He describes how humans, right, just by the way we have been created or the way we've been evolved, whatever floats your boat, there lends itself to two types of thinking. System one thinking is what he considers very fast, very intuitive, like a knee-jerk kind of thinking. This is very automatic, but the problem is that it's oftentimes very biased. Okay, so that's going to be a problem. System two is when you really apply yourself to thinking about a certain problem. You think about your math problems here at PSLE. I sit down, I think through my math problems. I am unlikely to make careless mistakes. But this is very obviously cognitively taxing. It's very tiring on you. So by default, by what I've just listed, most of us will live by system one. We often jump to conclusions, make mistakes that we would not have otherwise made had we thought more seriously about a certain issue. Okay, that's just human nature. I hope by now you are starting to appreciate that actually what we can do is to use AI to routinize system two thinking. That I purposely build in systems and processes that commit me to thinking slowly and deliberately. Okay, because now it's no longer cognitively taxing on me. I'm having this AI tool to support me with that. What are some examples of how we do that? Okay, so I've listed out some of the common cognitive biases or errors or approaches that we kind of think of, and some examples where we prompt. Okay, let's start with the first one. Right? I think this is my favorite, optimism bias. We overestimate the likely success of a certain plan. And what I usually would do is I'll prompt, do a pre-mortem. Why would my plan X fail? Okay, step back. What's a pre-mortem? Most teams have this thing called a post-mortem. After the body dies, after something dies or concludes, like a mortem or mortuary, we ask ourselves, we do an after-activity review. Why did this thing succeed or fail? We do it after activity. A very good practice is actually to do a pre-mortem, right? So even before you execute, at the planning or ideation stage, we ask ourselves, if this thing were to fail, what would be the reasons why? This is far more constructive because then if I can anticipate or I spend my time thinking how it can fail, I can reverse engineer and figure out ways to solve the problem. Okay, so I put this in as a prompt and then it will sharpen my thinking, countering my optimism bias. Confirmation bias, this can be an entire topic of its own. I have very big thoughts about how AI could actually exacerbate confirmation bias left to itself. But if you use it deliberately, you ask it what are strong critiques or strong weaknesses, or what are the weaknesses in my idea, that's very powerful. I think of these four, maybe the fourth one I want to highlight because it's very relevant, egocentric bias. We tend to think about things and perspectives through our own worldview. And even if we really try put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, we still kind of default to the way we think. Now, what I'll do is I'll then prompt how would stakeholders XYZ see this particular issue differently. In the context of education, for example, when we think about designing lessons for our students, perhaps we might be thinking, what if I have a student who's very kinesthetic? I just want to move about. As a student who prefers to sit by him or herself quietly to read the book, versus another student who just enjoys doing group work. What I can then do is I can run the same lesson idea through this prompt. I'll describe the different kinds of students in my class, and then I can sort of anticipate or predict how they are likely to respond to the lesson, and then I tweak accordingly. If you are you were doing marketing campaigns, doing your A/B testing, this is very relevant. If you're doing corporate communications, you want to do message testing on how different segments of society will respond to different headlines or whatever, this is also very relevant, very, very powerful tool. Okay. Now, that brings us to the end of this video. Just want to make some summary notes before I just do a quick demonstration on actually what the next video is going to be about. What we've seen in this video, prompting challenges. These oftentimes fail. AI gives us very generic output because it doesn't know our context and we don't have the words or language or ability to get AI to prompt it out of us. I've taken us through some novice prompt engineering. I suggested the COSTAR framework. It's a very, very powerful baseline. Okay, don't get me wrong. You can use it for most purposes. However, if you want to take your prompting to the next level, you want to use prompts to create prompts for AI, and you want to create prompts that help you to think better. And treat AI no longer as a glorified search engine, but as a thought partner. Okay. In the next video, I'll show you how to build all of these into a certain kind of process. But just to whet your appetite, let me just show very quickly, because I think a lot of people have requested for this. How do I use CustomGPTs? Okay, so this is my own personal CustomGPT. where I used to soundboard a lot of ideas, right? So for example, I'll just use a trigger word. Let's just use analyze. So this is a trigger word to trigger a certain process, Singapore's AI strategy. And what I have done with this particular GPT is that I've built in a lot of thinking frameworks or mental frameworks. For example, assessing tailwinds and headwinds, assessing things from first principles. And with just this word, the trigger word analyze, it produces a very structured thinking approach. Second order consequences, pre-modern thinking or inversion thinking, you recognize that actually a lot of these are consultancy kind of frameworks, are steel manning arguments, role-play slants. Okay, so if there's interest, you can come. This will be covered in the next video where I'll sort of show how you can build this into a process. I'll do a demonstration and share some tips when you're creating this. Okay, that's all for this video. Thank you.